I met Jag and found out about Ayn Rand about the same time. It was during 3 or 4 years ago at a Turning Point USA event. I walked outside of the convention center, and lo and behold, I see flashing blue lights. And turned out the police were there on the street. I see hundreds of our Turning Point USA youth out there, and there's commotion and things going on. Well, it turned out that Antifa had shown up to protest the event. And so I come out there and there's police. They've got their barriers set up and they're out there and lights flashing, police cars out there, streets blocked off. And on one side of the street, you had Antifa and they've got their signs up and they're, hurling insults and yelling. And then on the other side, you have the Turning Point USA kids who are out there also yelling and just back and forth between the two groups with the police officers in the middle. Anyway, while I was standing out there, I saw a tall, svelte lady standing and watching all of the commotion. So I went over next to her and I made some comment related to what was going on with the protesters and our side. We had this conversation about whether or not this was an exercise in futility, meaning our side being out there in force, engaging with Antifa. And my point was that it was an exercise in futility. I even actually quoted Ben Shapiro, something that he had said earlier, up to the point of, if you are in a debate with someone and you're not going to change their mind, they're not going to change your mind, and there's nobody in the audience whose mind is going to be changed, then you're in a futile debate. And after we had this conversation, she's like, yeah, that sounds reasonable. And we kept talking. And at one point while we were communicating, mind you, I had no idea who I was speaking with. A friend of mine comes along and she says, hey to me. And then she looks at Jack and she's like, oh my gosh, you're Jennifer Grossman. And Jag is like, yeah, I'm Jennifer Grossman, CEO of the Atlas Society. And as they started talking, I realized who I had been speaking with this entire time. And so, interestingly enough, I had actually heard about Ayn Rand previously because my parents, specifically my dad and my younger brother, actually had gotten into some of the films that were made for the Atlas Shrugged books. And while they had gotten into it, so I got familiar with Ayn Rand through that. I never read any of the works myself or looked into it myself. But later on that night, as after my friend had walked away, there was a banquet going on, and Jag actually invited me to be her special guest at this banquet. And I went there with her, and that's when we talked more about, my future and what I'm doing with law and all of this stuff, and also about Ayn Rand and, some of her works. And it was from that conversation that I decided to delve deeper. I got into the books, read everything from, Virtue of Selfishness to Fountainhead, We the Living, just multiple books. And when I got to Virtue of Selfishness, that one, it really struck a chord with me to the point where I read that book 3 or 4 times a week, every week for a period of about 6 to 8 months. And it's just been great getting into Ayn Rand and also becoming part of the Atlas Society and getting to do some traveling and everything with them. So I encourage you guys, get involved, get into the readings, but in addition, get involved, right? Like, join with Atlas Society. It's an awesome organization. And yeah, that's the story of how I met Jag and found out about Ayn Rand.